The night shift began the same way it always did. The hospital was quieter after midnight, but never truly silent. Machines breathed for patients. Monitors blinked. Shoes whispered over polished floors. Somewhere, an elevator chimed, then closed again. Nurse Lena Carter walked the East Wing with a clipboard held against her chest. Her pace was measured. Not rushed, not slow, just exact. She checked room 412 first. An elderly man with pneumonia, oxygen saturation stable. She adjusted the nasal cannula, pressed a finger lightly against his wrist, counted the pulse in her head. She wrote the number down, neat and small. Room 414, post-operative. Pain controlled. She asked 2 questions, listened, and nodded once. Her voice was low, calm, precise. She did not linger. To the staff, she was the kind of nurse who never caused trouble. She did not gossip. She did not complain about shifts. She did not join the others in the break room to talk about management or the new security contractor. She simply worked. At the nurse's station, a younger nurse, Emily, was scrolling through her phone. "Did you hear about the contractors?" Emily asked without looking up. Lena placed the clipboard on the desk. "What contractors?" "Security upgrade. Some federal people or something. They're replacing cameras. Real serious types. You'd think we're a military base." Lena nodded once. "Where are they working?" "Lobby. Basement. They were here earlier. Tall guys. Quiet." Lena did not respond. She looked down at the security monitor instead. 4 screens were active. 2 were blank. One showed the loading dock. One showed the main corridor. She tilted her head slightly, noticing the refresh delay. Half a second too long. She wrote nothing about it. She walked to the supply room and opened a cabinet. Saline bags, tourniquets, trauma kits. She adjusted the placement of 3 items, aligning them so they could be reached without looking. Her hands moved with practiced economy. She paused at the emergency stairwell and pressed the door open, just enough to feel the air. It was quiet. She looked down the stairwell, counted steps, checked the lighting. She closed the door. Back at the nurse's station, Dr. Harris was charting. He glanced up. "Carter, you're on point tonight, like always." She nodded. "Ever think about moving into management?" he asked. She shook her head. He smiled and returned to his screen. No one asked why she always chose night shifts. No one asked why she preferred understaffed wings. No one asked why she memorized floor plans without being told. At 1:12, she took a break in the empty cafeteria. She sat alone with a cup of coffee she did not drink. Her eyes moved across the room, noting exits, blind spots, the reflection in the vending machine glass. She listened to footsteps in the corridor above. Counted them. 2 people. Heavy boots. Not hospital issue. She stood and returned to her floor. On the way, she passed the lobby. 2 men stood near the front desk, dark jackets, no visible insignia. One was speaking quietly to the night receptionist. The other scanned the room with a slow, deliberate gaze. He looked through Lena, not at her. She lowered her eyes and walked past. In the elevator, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes for a moment. Not tired. Focused. She exhaled once. Back on the East Wing, she stopped by a locked maintenance door. It was slightly ajar. That was new. She opened it. Inside, a temporary control panel had been installed. Wires exposed. A laptop on a folding table. A man in a dark polo shirt was seated, typing. He turned when he heard her. "Restricted area," he said. "I'm a nurse," Lena replied. "This wing is under my care." He stared at her for a second, then nodded toward the hall. "Use another route." She nodded once and closed the door. As she walked away, she noted the serial numbers on the equipment. The model of the router, the brand of the portable camera hub. None of it matched hospital procurement. She returned to room 418. A teenage patient slept with headphones on. She adjusted the IV drip, checked the line, taped a loose tube with clean, careful motions. Her reflection in the glass was pale, expressionless. At 2:03, the overhead lights dimmed for the scheduled power cycle. They came back on, except 2 corridor lights. She stopped walking, looked up, counted the flicker intervals. 2 irregular. She wrote nothing in the log. At 2:30, she stood by the nurse's station again. Emily was asleep with her head on her arms. Lena adjusted the security monitor brightness. She watched the lobby feed. The 2 men were gone. 3 new figures stood near the entrance, talking to a uniformed guard. The guard nodded too quickly. Lena leaned back slightly. Her posture changed, but no one noticed. She looked down at her badge. L. Carter, RN. The plastic card was worn from years of use. She turned it over, thumb resting on the clipped edge. She slipped it back into place. Down the hall, a patient coughed. A monitor beeped. Lena walked toward the sound. Footsteps quiet, movements controlled. The hospital continued its routine. The staff continued their charts. The night continued to feel ordinary, but Lena counted every step, every sound, every door, and she did not sleep. The hospital was designed to erase tension. Soft colors, rounded corners, lighting that never felt harsh. Even at night, the place tried to feel safe. Lena did not trust that feeling. At 3:14, she walked the west corridor with a tray of medication. Her footsteps were silent on the linoleum. She paused at each door, scanned each chart, listened for breathing patterns that were off rhythm. In room 506, a middle-aged woman slept with an oxygen mask. Lena adjusted the strap, checked the tubing, and tightened a loose connection. Her fingers moved without hesitation. She stood there for a moment longer than necessary. She listened. There were footsteps in the hallway that did not match the staff cadence. Not the soft rubber soles of nurses, not the measured pace of doctors on rounds, heavy, deliberate, paired. She stepped into the corridor. 2 men walked past her, carrying a sealed equipment case. They wore hospital badges clipped to their belts. The badges looked new. Too new. "Morning," she said quietly. One of them nodded without slowing. She watched them disappear around the corner. She noted the direction, the case size, the way the taller one kept his right hand close to his waist. She wrote none of it down. At the nurse's station, Emily had woken up and was pouring coffee. "You ever feel like this place is off tonight?" Emily asked. Lena opened the medication drawer. "Off how?" "I don't know. Security everywhere. Maintenance guys I don't recognize. They told me to badge into the supply elevator. I've never had to do that." Lena closed the drawer. "Did you?" "Yeah. I mean, they had ID, and Dr. Harris said admin approved everything." Lena nodded. Approval meant very little. She walked to the supply elevator and scanned her badge. The system hesitated before unlocking. A half-second delay. She stepped inside and watched the numbers descend. In the basement, the corridor smelled of disinfectant and old concrete. Temporary cables ran along the ceiling, taped hastily. A new camera was bolted above the pharmacy door. She stopped under it and looked up. The lens followed her. She walked past without reacting. At the pharmacy, she checked the controlled medication log. Nothing missing. Nothing added. She verified the seal on the narcotics cabinet, pressed lightly on the hinges, and tested the keypad response time. She closed the cabinet. A man stood in the hallway, leaning against a cart. He was not wearing scrubs. His jacket was plain, unmarked. "You lost?" he asked. "No," she said. "I work here." He studied her face. "This area is being upgraded. Try not to linger. I'm on rounds." He nodded, but his eyes stayed on her until she walked away. Back upstairs, she entered the stairwell instead of the elevator. She moved quietly, counting steps, testing each landing door. On the 4th floor, she stopped. The door to the stairwell was propped open with a folded towel. She removed it and closed the door. It latched with a dull click. She listened. Silence. She resumed climbing. On the 6th floor, she exited and walked toward the ICU. The doors required dual authentication now. She scanned her badge and entered a code. Inside, the lighting was dimmer. Machines hummed in steady rhythm. She checked a ventilated patient, adjusted settings per protocol, and logged the changes. Her handwriting was precise, controlled. A resident stood nearby, yawning. "You're always so calm," he said. "Doesn't this place ever get to you?" She shook her head. "It's predictable." He laughed quietly. "Tonight doesn't feel predictable." She did not respond. She walked past the nurse's lounge and into a storage room. She opened a cabinet and pulled out a folded floor plan of the hospital. It was old, creased, and marked with handwritten notes. She unfolded it on a table. She traced routes with her finger. Stairwells, service corridors, ventilation shafts. She marked 3 new cameras with a pen. She circled 2 blind spots. She folded the map and placed it back. At 4:27, a delivery arrived at the loading dock. She watched the feed from the nurse's station. A van with no markings. 2 men unloaded crates. A hospital logistics supervisor signed paperwork. The crates were wheeled toward the basement. Lena zoomed the camera feed. The crates were labeled as medical equipment. The font was wrong. She noted the license plate. She noted the time. She did not report it. At 5 o'clock, she made another round. In room 321, a young boy stirred in his sleep. She adjusted his blanket, checked his IV, and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. Her touch was gentle. Her eyes were calculating. In the hallway, she paused and listened to a distant argument. Voices near the administrative wing. Low, tense. She walked closer but did not intrude. She returned to the nurse's station and began charting. At 5:32, the intercom crackled. A test message from security. "Attention staff. Temporary security measures are in place. Please follow all instructions from contracted personnel." Emily rolled her eyes. "Contracted personnel? That sounds ominous." Lena typed steadily. At 6:10, dawn began to lighten the windows. The night staff grew quieter, heavier with fatigue. Lena remained unchanged. She walked to the lobby again. The same men stood near the front desk. Different positions, same posture. One of them noticed her looking. She looked away first. She stopped by the coffee kiosk and picked up a cup she did not need. Her reflection in the glass showed a tired nurse in scrubs, hair pulled back, eyes neutral. No one saw the calculation beneath. She walked back to the east wing. In the stairwell, she paused and pressed her ear to the wall. Voices carried faintly through the ventilation shaft. "Tonight. Admin wing. Isolate." She listened for 10 seconds, then walked away. At the nurse's station, she sat down and opened her logbook. She did not write about the men. She did not write about the crates. She did not write about the cameras. She wrote only patient vitals. She closed the book and folded her hands. Her shift would end in an hour. Another nurse would replace her. But Lena did not think in shifts. She thought in contingencies. She looked down the corridor, counting doors, counting staff, counting the distance to the stairwell. Her expression did not change. The hospital continued to feel safe. Lena knew it was not. The takeover began without an announcement. It began with a lock. At 19:47 the following evening, Lena was back on duty. Another night shift, another set of corridors, another rotation of patients who assumed the hospital would protect them. She was reviewing medication orders when the magnetic doors at the east wing locked with a sharp mechanical click. She looked up. The corridor lights flickered once, then stabilized. A second click followed, then a third. The nurse's station terminal froze for 2 seconds, then reloaded with a new banner. "Security protocol active. Do not override." Emily looked up from her chair. "Did you touch something?" Lena shook her head. They both heard footsteps, not rushed, not panicked, coordinated. 4 men moved down the corridor. Dark jackets, no insignia, earpieces. One carried a compact rifle held low, barrel angled toward the floor. Patients began to open doors. A man in a hospital gown stepped into the hallway, confused. One of the men raised a hand, palm open. "Return to your room. This is a controlled situation." His voice was calm, professional, practiced. The patient hesitated, then retreated. Emily whispered, "What is this?" Lena stood up slowly. The men stopped at the nurse's station. "We are federal contractors assisting with a security incident," the lead man said. He held up a laminated card. "You will follow our instructions. Do not call outside agencies. Do not trigger alarms. Your systems are being routed through us." Dr. Harris stepped out of a patient room, brows furrowed. "This is highly irregular," he said. "Administration did not—" The man's gaze did not change. "Administration is aware. You will remain on your floor and continue patient care. Any deviation will be treated as interference." He turned to Lena. "You, name." "Carter," she said. "Lead nurse on this wing?" "Yes." "You will be our point of contact. If we need patients moved, medication accessed, or staff compliance, you will execute." She nodded once. He studied her for a second longer than necessary, then moved on. The men continued down the corridor, positioning themselves at intersections, stairwells, and elevators. Within minutes, the hospital felt different. Phones stopped working. External lines were dead. Internal messaging lagged. Patients began to sense something was wrong. A woman in room 410 began crying. A man in ICU tried to sit up against restraints. A visitor in pediatrics shouted at a guard. Lena walked from room to room, calming voices, adjusting equipment, speaking softly. Her hands did not shake. At 20:03, the intercom activated again. "Attention all staff. A security operation is in progress. Continue duties. Do not attempt to leave your assigned areas." The message repeated. Lena returned to the nurse's station. Emily was pale. "Is this legal?" she whispered. Lena did not answer. She looked at the security monitors. Every camera now showed a different angle. Blind spots had been eliminated. New feeds were active. Some showed administrative offices. Some showed the loading dock. The men had prepared for this. She checked the administrative wing feed. 2 intruders stood outside the hospital director's office. Inside, staff were seated, hands visible, silent. This was not a robbery. This was controlled occupation. She felt the familiar tightening behind her eyes. Not fear. Focus. At 20:15, one of the men returned to the nurse's station. "Carter," he said quietly, "we will be conducting controlled movement of certain patients to secure areas. You will assist. Which patients?" "Ones we identify." He handed her a list. 3 names were circled. All were in critical care. All had complex histories. She looked at him. "Why?" "Security." She nodded. She walked to the ICU. The doors opened slowly. Inside, a man lay unconscious, ventilated, monitors tracing slow rhythms. She checked his chart. She checked his face. She felt something else. This was not random. She adjusted his tubing, checked his vitals, and nodded to the intruder waiting by the door. "He can be moved in 10 minutes, she said. He nodded. She returned to the nurse's station. Emily whispered, "Why are they moving ICU patients?" Lena kept her voice low. "Follow protocol. Do not interfere." Emily stared at her. Lena's expression was unchanged. At 20:40, a convoy of stretchers moved down the corridor. The men escorted them, weapons visible now. Staff followed, silent. Patients watched from doorways. Fear spread without sound. Lena walked alongside the stretcher, her hand on the IV pole, adjusting drip rates as they moved. She counted steps. She noted escort spacing. She measured reaction times. In the administrative wing, the doors closed behind them. The men locked the corridor. A standoff had begun. No sirens, no shouting, only controlled occupation. Lena looked at the men. She looked at the patients. She looked at the locked doors. Her face was calm. Her mind was already moving through contingencies. This was no longer a suspicion. This was an operation, and she was inside it. The administrative wing felt colder. Not physically, structurally. Lena stood at the security checkpoint, where the corridor narrowed into a controlled choke point. Two men stood on either side of the double doors. Their weapons were no longer hidden. She carried a clipboard and a tray of medications. Her posture was neutral. Inside, the hospital director and 3 senior administrators sat in a conference room. Their phones were on the table. Their hands were visible. Their faces were pale. One of the intruders, the same lead man from earlier, stepped forward. "Carter," he said, "you will remain here while we finalize internal compliance." She nodded. He studied her again. "You are calm," he said. "This is a hospital," she replied. "Patients need calm." He watched her for a moment, then turned back to his team. She remained standing, clipboard held loosely, eyes lowered. But she listened. "Data access secured," one man whispered. "Waiting for confirmation," another replied. The lead man nodded once. Lena shifted her weight slightly. She looked down the hallway. Counted personnel. 3 guards at this wing, 2 in the stairwell, 1 near the ICU. She noted the blind angle created by a cart parked too close to the wall. She noted the rhythm of their patrol. At 21:12, a nurse approached with a trembling hand. "I need access," the nurse said quietly. "Room 509 needs morphine." One of the intruders stepped forward. "Provide credentials." The nurse fumbled with her badge. Lena stepped in. "I'll escort," she said. The man looked at her, hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Lena and the nurse walked down the corridor. The nurse whispered, "This is wrong. We should call police." "The lines are down," Lena said. "They can't just—" "Focus on the patient," Lena said. Her voice was quiet, controlled. They entered room 509. A man writhed in pain. Lena prepared the medication, checked dosage, administered slowly. She watched his breathing stabilize. She looked at the window. A man stood outside, watching her. She did not react. Back in the hallway, she returned the vial to the tray and walked toward the checkpoint. The guard stopped her. "Stay within your designated zone." "Yes." She paused, then looked directly at him. "Are you military?" He hesitated. "Contractor." She nodded once. "Which agency?" He stared at her for a second, then looked away. "Return to station." She complied. She walked back to the nurse's station. Emily whispered, "They're asking for specific patients. What's going on?" "I don't know," Lena said. That was true. She only knew this was not random occupation. It was targeted. At 21:45, a disturbance broke out near pediatrics. A father shouted at one of the men. He demanded answers. He demanded to leave. The intruder raised his weapon slightly. Lena moved first. She stepped between them. "Sir," she said quietly, "your child needs monitoring. This will not help." The father's voice broke. They locked the doors. "My wife is outside." Lena held his gaze. "I will check on your child personally," she said. The man lowered his hands. The intruder studied her, then lowered his weapon. She walked the father back to the room. She checked the child's monitor, adjusted tubing, spoke in a low voice. The father watched her. She did not offer reassurance beyond what was factual. At 22:10, the lead intruder approached her again. "You de-escalated that efficiently," he said. "It's my job." He tilted his head slightly. "You have crisis training. All nurses do." He did not reply. He handed her a small device. "Emergency channel. Use only if patient stability is compromised by our operation." She took it. She turned it over in her hand. Lightweight, military-grade casing. She clipped it inside her pocket. He walked away. She returned to the supply room. She closed the door. She leaned against the metal cabinet and exhaled once. Then she opened her floor plan again. She marked guard positions. She marked locked doors. She marked the administrative wing. She circled one word: objective unknown. She folded the map and placed it back. Then she checked her watch. She did not feel fear. She felt the weight of timing. She stepped back into the corridor, face calm, movements ordinary. To everyone else, she was just a nurse trying to keep patients calm. To herself, this was the first direct contact with an occupying force, and she had confirmed something important. They did not fully understand who they had taken control from. At 2318, the hospital began to fragment. Not physically, organizationally. The intruders controlled doors, cameras, and communications. But they did not control the routines. They did not control the quiet habits of staff who had worked here for years. Lena understood routines. She walked the East Wing with a tray of sterile supplies. Her pace was unhurried. Her posture unremarkable. In the supply room, she stopped. The door closed behind her. She did not turn on the overhead light. The emergency bulb was enough. She opened the cabinet where oxygen regulators were stored. She moved 2 boxes, revealing a narrow service panel. She pressed against it. The panel shifted. Behind it, a narrow maintenance conduit ran vertically between floors. It was not on public schematics. She had discovered it months ago. She checked the latch. It opened silently. She stepped inside, closed it, and listened. Footsteps passed outside. Voices. A radio transmission. She waited until silence returned. She climbed 2 meters, stopped, and listened again. The conduit opened behind the ICU supply closet. She emerged and replaced the panel. Inside the ICU, the lighting was dim. Nurses moved quietly between beds. The intruders stood at the main door but did not patrol inside. They believed medical staff would not interfere. They were correct. They did not consider alternative routes. Lena walked to the charge nurse. "Security is rerouting power," the charge nurse whispered. "Some monitors lagged." "Which circuits?" "North Wing backup grid." Lena nodded. She walked to the biomedical engineering closet. The door was locked, but she had access. She entered, closed it, and stood in front of the panel. She studied the layout. She did not cut power. She did not disrupt. She labeled. She memorized which outlets were on which circuit, which cameras depended on which feeds, which doors required which nodes. She left everything untouched. Control was not about disruption. It was about selective reliability. She returned to the East Wing. Emily met her near the nurses' station. "They asked for you again?" Emily whispered. "Admin wing." Lena nodded. She walked to the administrative corridor. The lead intruder waited. "Carter," he said, "we need medication logs and access to long-term patient histories. I'll retrieve them. You will not access the central server without supervision." She nodded. Inside the records office, she logged in under supervision. She retrieved requested files. She printed nothing. She transmitted nothing. She watched their procedures. They were methodical, not rushed, but not medical. She noticed how they prioritized certain names. She memorized them. Back in the corridor, one of the men spoke into a radio. "Phase 2 pending. We maintain posture." Lena walked past without reacting. At 0002, she returned to the supply room on the East Wing. She locked the door. She moved a shelf aside and revealed a small desk. On it, a personal notebook, a folded antenna wire, and a compact handheld device disguised as a pager. She turned it on, static. Then a faint signal. She pressed a button and whispered, "Node active." She waited. A faint response crackled. She turned it off immediately. She placed it back. She walked to the nurses' station and began charting. To anyone watching, she was complying. In reality, she was mapping command structure. She observed which intruders issued orders, which deferred, which carried specialized equipment. She noted that the lead man avoided windows. She noted that 2 others had medical training. She noted that their perimeter had a flaw. At 1:15, she requested permission to move a patient to imaging. The guard checked his radio, then nodded. She pushed the stretcher through the corridor. The imaging department was quiet. The technician was nervous. "Are we allowed to do this?" he whispered. "Yes," Lena said. She positioned the patient, checked vitals, and stepped aside. While the technician worked, she walked the hallway. The intruders had posted only one guard here. She tested a service door. It opened. Inside was a maintenance corridor leading toward the loading dock. She closed the door. She did not use it. She returned to the patient. She completed imaging. She returned to the east wing. At 2 o'clock, she stood in the stairwell. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes for 10 seconds. Not rest, calibration. She thought in layers. Internal staff, intruder hierarchy, infrastructure vulnerabilities, patient risk thresholds. She stepped back into the corridor. At 2:12, she gathered 3 senior nurses and spoke quietly. If doors lock unexpectedly, route patients to interior rooms. Avoid stairwells. Keep supplies in motion. Do not cluster. They looked at her. "Is this official protocol?" one asked. "Yes," Lena said. It was not. They obeyed. She did not explain. She did not need to. By 3 o'clock, subtle shifts occurred. Staff stopped using certain corridors. Patients were grouped in safer rooms. Supply carts were positioned as mobile barriers. The intruders noticed none of it. At 3:34, the lead intruder walked past the nurse's station. He stopped. He watched the wing. He noticed patterns changing. He looked at Lena. She met his gaze briefly. Then she looked away. He hesitated, then continued walking. She resumed charting. To the hospital, she was still a nurse. To the occupying force, she was still a compliant staff member. But the hospital's internal rhythm was now moving according to her quiet design, and she had created something more powerful than resistance. She had created order that did not belong to them. At 4:26, the first threat was made. It was not shouted. It was delivered quietly, in a tone that suggested inevitability. Lena was adjusting an infusion pump when her pager vibrated. Admin wing. Immediate. She walked there without rushing. Inside the administrative corridor, the lighting was brighter. The air felt tense. The lead intruder stood near the conference room. 2 administrators sat against the wall. Their hands were still visible. A third administrator was not. "Carter," the lead man said, "we have a compliance issue." He pointed toward a side office. Inside, a hospital IT director sat at a desk. His wrists were restrained with medical tape. His face was flushed. "He attempted to access external networks," the lead man said. "He claims he was checking patient data integrity. We consider that interference." Lena looked at the IT director. "Did you try to contact outside agencies?" she asked. He hesitated. "Yes," he said. "This is kidnapping. This is—" "Enough," the lead man said. He turned back to Lena. "We will use a controlled deterrent to maintain discipline. You will assist medically." He handed her a syringe. "Sedative. Moderate dose." She looked at it. This was not lethal, but it was coercion. "He has a cardiac history," she said. "We assessed that," the lead man said. "Proceed." She nodded. She stepped closer to the IT director. He looked at her. "Please," he whispered. "You know this is wrong." She held his gaze. "I will monitor you," she said quietly. She administered the sedative with careful precision. She watched his breathing, his heart rate. The intruders watched her hands. She finished, applied pressure, and secured the site. "He will remain stable," she said. The lead man nodded. "Good." She stepped back. This was the line. They were willing to harm staff to maintain control. At 5:10, an argument broke out near the ICU. One of the intruders had blocked a physician from entering a critical patient room. "This patient needs intervention," the physician said. "Now." "You will wait for authorization," the intruder replied, the patient's monitor alarmed. Lena arrived. She assessed the monitor. "Authorize now," she said. The intruder hesitated. She met his eyes. "If he arrests, this becomes uncontrolled," she said. He checked his radio. "Authorize," came the reply. She entered the room. She stabilized the patient with efficient minimal movements. She administered medication, adjusted ventilation, and called for supplies. Her actions were clinical, her timing exact. The physician watched her. "You handled that like an ICU specialist," he said. She did not respond. At 6 o'clock, the intruders began rotating shifts. New men arrived through the loading dock. They carried heavier equipment. The atmosphere changed, more aggressive, less patient. At 6:22, a young nurse refused to follow an order. One of the new intruders raised his weapon. Lena stepped in. "Stand down," she said. The intruder looked at her. "Chain of command," he said. She held his gaze. "This is a medical facility. You will not escalate here." He hesitated. The lead man intervened. "Carter is our liaison," he said. "Follow her directives regarding patient care." The intruder lowered his weapon. She looked at the nurse. "Go," she said. The nurse left. At 7 o'clock, the hospital director was brought into the corridor. The intruders wanted a broadcast. The director's hands trembled. "We cannot make a public statement," he whispered to Lena. "They want compliance," she said. "They want silence." She understood. At 7:20, the intercom activated. "This is hospital administration. A security operation is ongoing. All patients and staff must remain calm." The director's voice shook. The message repeated. Fear deepened. At 8 o'clock, a complication emerged. A patient in the administrative wing went into cardiac arrest. One of the intruders had brought him there as leverage. They had not planned for medicine. "Carter," the lead man said, "fix this." She moved instantly. She called for a crash cart. She began CPR. Her compressions were precise, her voice calm. "Epinephrine, now." She defibrillated. She monitored. The patient stabilized. The intruders watched. They had seen discipline. They had not seen competence under fire. Afterward, the lead man spoke quietly. "You are more than a standard nurse." She wiped her hands. "I am exactly what you see." He did not believe her. At 9:15, he made his mistake. He ordered one of the critical patients to be transferred again. "The patient was unstable. You will kill him," Lena said. "That is acceptable collateral," he said. She looked at him. This was escalation. Her silence ended here. The corridor was quiet when the decision arrived. Not loud, not dramatic, just inevitable. The patient lay on the stretcher in the administrative wing. 63 years old, post-stroke complications, on vasopressors. His blood pressure was already fragile. Two intruders stood beside him. One had a hand on the rail, the other held a tablet with patient data. The lead man watched Lena. "We move him," he said. "He is leverage." "He will not survive transport," she said. "He is not the objective." She looked at the patient's face. His eyes were half open. He was aware enough to be afraid. She leaned closer to him and adjusted the oxygen mask. "You are stable for now," she said quietly. He tried to speak. She pressed a hand to his shoulder. "Save your energy." She stood and faced the lead man. "I will not authorize this," she said. He tilted his head. "You are a nurse, yes. You do not dictate operational movement. Then you will dictate a death," she said. He held her gaze. Around them, staff pretended not to listen. They listened. The lead man stepped closer. "You have been compliant. You have been useful. Do not change that." "This is a hospital," she said. "Your leverage ends here." He studied her. "Are you prepared to escalate?" She did not answer immediately. She thought in outcomes. Patient survival probability, intruder escalation probability, staff reaction, external response time. She had delayed, she had mapped, she had redirected, but now, someone would die. She stepped closer to the stretcher and placed her hand on the IV pole. "If you move him, she said. You do so over my objection and without medical support. He stared at her. Do you understand what that implies? Yes. A long pause. Then he nodded to one of his men. Restrain her if necessary. The man stepped forward. He reached for her wrist. She did not resist violently. She shifted her stance. She guided his hand away with a gentle motion, as if correcting a patient's movement. Her fingers applied pressure at a precise point on his forearm. He froze, not in pain. In sudden loss of strength, he stepped back, confused. She did not strike him. She did not escalate physically. She simply controlled space. The lead man noticed. You have training, he said. She looked at him. I have ethics. He did not respond. He looked at the patient again. He considered risk. He nodded once. Leave him, for now. The stretcher remained. The patient remained alive. The staff watched. Something had shifted. At 10:12, the lead man called her into the conference room alone. The administrator sat silently against the wall. He closed the door. You are no longer just a nurse to this operation, he said. She did not respond. You have influenced decisions beyond medical protocol. That is my duty. Your duty is clinical. Not when people are used as leverage. He stared at her. You are aware this jeopardizes your position. Yes, he leaned back. You are either very brave or very naive. She looked at the wall. Neither. He studied her for a moment. Who trained you? She did not answer. He tapped the table. You walk like military. You manage stress like command staff. You evaluate risk like an operator. She looked at him. You hired contractors. You should know how training looks. He smiled slightly. You are not a contractor. She did not deny it. She stood. If you are done, I will return to patients. He hesitated. Go. She left. In the hallway, Emily waited. Are they going to move him? She whispered. No. How did you? Do your rounds, Lena said. Emily nodded and left. At 11:30, Lena walked into the stairwell. She sat on the steps. She pressed her hands together. She thought about consequences. She had drawn attention. She had broken neutrality. Her anonymity was compromised. She had crossed the moral line. She stood. She returned to the corridor. The intruders watched her differently now, not as staff, as variable, and variables demanded control. The standoff had reached its point of decision. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and tension. By 12:05, the intruders had consolidated their positions, guards at stairwells, corridors, and entrances. The administrative wing locked down like a vault. Outside, sirens were silent, either unaware or delayed. Lena walked toward the east wing, clipboard in hand. Her movements were casual, measured, unassuming. Every step was calculated, every pause intentional. A nurse in ICU whispered, They're taking over the lab. They want the controlled substances. Lena nodded. Stay inside. Keep patients stable. She approached the administrative corridor. The lead intruder stood with two men reviewing documents on a tablet. When he saw her, his posture stiffened. Carter, he said, your cooperation has been unusual. Do not complicate matters. I'm here to ensure patient safety, she said softly. He glanced at his team. Escort her out. We don't need interference. She stopped, hands relaxed at her sides. Her eyes scanned the hallway, noting guard rotations, blind spots, emergency exits, and ventilation shafts. She stepped forward. One slow, deliberate motion. Or, she said, you compromise patients. One of the men advanced. Lena's response was silent but precise. A subtle shift of weight, a light push against the man's forearm, enough to unbalance him, but not injure. His momentum carried him into a wall. He froze. The other intruder blinked, startled. The lead man frowned. Do you realize what you're doing? I realize what needs to be done, Lena said. She took one step forward, then another. The corridor became hers. Guards instinctively adjusted their positions, creating distance. She never drew a weapon. She never shouted. Yet the authority in her movements, the precision in her observation commanded compliance. "Move the patients to secure rooms," she said, addressing the intruders like an officer issuing orders. They hesitated. One glanced at the lead man. The lead man hesitated, and in that hesitation, Lena created control. She walked to the first critical patient in ICU, adjusted monitors, stabilized IVs, reassured staff with quiet gestures. Every action reminded everyone. She knew the patients better than the intruders knew the building. Two men tried to move a patient as leverage. Lena blocked them, not with violence, but with perfectly timed steps, positioning, and unwavering gaze. The patient remained safe. The lead intruder finally spoke into a radio. "Phase compromised. Stand down. Extraction delayed." Lena moved through the administrative wing, coordinating staff. Not orders, but guidance. Calm, deliberate, precise. By 12:42, the intruders were being contained, subtly, without overt conflict. They could not use the patients as leverage without risking catastrophe. Lena had turned the tables entirely, her quiet competence dictating the operation from inside. A final exchange with the lead man occurred in the hallway. He studied her carefully. "You were never just a nurse," he said. "I am a nurse," she replied. "I protect life first." He tilted his head, acknowledging defeat without words. The intruders began retreating, reorganizing, realizing they were outmaneuvered. Lena's staff moved with her guidance, maintaining order. Patients remained unharmed. In less than an hour, the standoff had ended, not with explosions, not with heroics, but with disciplined, quiet authority. Lena checked each patient one last time. Monitors stable, IVs flowing, alarms silent. She walked back to the nurse's station. Emily watched her with wide eyes. "They left," Emily whispered. Lena nodded. "For now." No one celebrated. No sirens blared. No cameras captured her actions. She simply resumed her routine. Every step precise. Every patient stable. Every threat quietly neutralized. And the hospital, once threatened, returned to calm, because she had commanded it from within. By 14:30, the hospital was functional again. The intruders were gone. Police had arrived at the perimeter, but had been briefed by administration that the situation was under control. No shots had been fired. No patients harmed. Lena walked through the corridors slowly, checking patients and staff. Her hands adjusted blankets, verified IV lines, and recorded vitals. She spoke softly when answering questions, her voice calm. The hospital director approached her, his face pale but relieved. "Carter," he said quietly, I don't even know how to thank you." She looked at him briefly. "I was doing my job." "Your job?" he repeated, incredulous. Everyone saw what you did. You coordinated everything. You handled the intruders. You saved lives. She interrupted gently. "Patients are stable. That's all that matters." He hesitated. "But the way Administration and staff know their roles," she said. "I just made sure they executed them." He nodded, still processing. He did not press further. A federal agent approached her quietly. He spoke in a low tone. "You were very effective," he said. "I recognize the methods you used." "That wasn't standard training." Lena looked at him. "I've worked in hospitals long enough to know procedures. Observation and discipline go further than force." He gave a slight nod. "Understood." No one else overheard. No one else would know. Emily came up behind her, eyes wide. You really did all that?" Lena smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "It needed to be done. That's all." By 1500, the hospital was quiet again. Staff resumed their shifts. Patients were calm. Equipment humming normally. Lena checked the security monitor one last time. No intruders. Doors locked normally. Cameras online. Lines restored. She did not seek recognition. She did not ask for thanks. The director made a formal statement to staff, praising teamwork and professionalism, but no name was mentioned. The newspapers would call it a quiet night at the hospital and efficient staff management. Lena's name would not appear. She walked the halls slowly, checking vitals, making rounds, speaking softly to patients. The corridors were calm, but her mind cataloged every action, every intruder movement, every gap she had exploited. It would be useful. Someday. For now, the hospital was safe. For now, she remained exactly what everyone believed her to be. A nurse. Nothing more. The night had passed. Not with sirens, not with accolades, not with parades. Just ordinary lights, ordinary beeps, ordinary floors. Lena moved through the East Wing with her usual precision. She checked vitals, adjusted IV lines, and ensured monitors were stable. Every patient breathing, every alarm silent. Emily approached quietly, holding a cup of coffee. "You okay?" she asked softly. Lena nodded, her expression calm. "We're fine. Everyone's fine." Emily hesitated, searching her face. "Do you feel different?" "I do what I need to do," Lena said simply. "That hasn't changed." She walked past the nurses' station, past the empty cafeteria, past the flickering fluorescent lights in the hallway. She stopped at the supply room, adjusted a few boxes on the shelf, checked that everything was aligned, nothing out of place. Nothing visible had changed. She paused by the stairwell, listening. Silence. Just the hum of ventilation and the faint beep of monitors. No one acknowledged her. No one celebrated her actions, and she did not want it. She returned to a patient room, adjusted the blanket on a sleeping child, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. Her touch was quiet, careful. Outside, the sky lightened. Morning filtered through the windows. She walked the hall one last time, checked doors, verified locked entrances, counted steps. Her mind catalogued, recorded, prepared. Always prepared. The hospital had returned to its rhythm. Calm, safe, ordinary, and Lena fit seamlessly back into it. A nurse. Nothing more. And yet, if anyone had looked closely, if anyone had truly paid attention, they would have known that beneath the scrubs, behind the calm eyes, a quiet command had held a standoff, had saved lives, had turned chaos into order, but no one needed to know. The hospital never knew, and that was how it should be. She walked on, steady, unremarkable, carrying the weight of what had been done and the certainty that she would do it again if she had to. Because true authority was never loud, it was never noticed, it was quiet, and it was absolute.